guys. Welcome back to another episode.
Sorry. Our man behind the curtain
yes.
makes us laugh when we get started.
Yes, he does. Okay, so healthy behavior. So this is another set of slides dedicated to the health and wellness component of our course. Of
That's
what
right.
we need to know. So what we're going to talk about today are healthy behaviors. So that's talking about nutrition, movement, hydration, sleep, mental health, substance abuse. So we're going to kind of dig a little deeper into these topics as we go through our slides today. Okay, so let's start with nutrition. So basically, we're going to follow a client-centered approach to nutrition, if you can at all believe that. It's a new idea, I know.
Wow.
However, again, we are going to let the client lead because, you know, we could tell somebody to eat Brussels sprouts all day long, and if they hate them, it's just going to backfire. So we really do want that client to be determining what is the best dietary approach that they're going to take when working within the realm of, you know, if you have someone with diabetes, then clearly we have some goals inside of what that looks like. Yet the client really is going to be in charge of, you know, even how deep into it that they want to go. Mm-hmm. And so it's really our job to just be familiar with those recommendations that we talked about in our earlier slides of, you know, we're talking about my plate and those types of things. We want to have a basic understanding of what that is so that we can provide those reliable resources. And we do want to have an understanding that this is one of the hottest topics out there. And again, we talked about it a little bit in our earlier slides. We want to know kind of those controversies that are out there and kind of the new bandwagons and what's kind of trending out there, just so we can have discussions around that if necessary. Mm-hmm. Okay, so basic nutritional guidelines. This is pretty much going to always be a general recommendation that we can always follow. You know, we really want to eat a minimally processed whole food diet. And generally, if we stick to real food, regardless of which way we want to tackle it, it's going to serve our bodies. And, you know, we want to make sure that we're getting in lean proteins, adequate fiber, healthier fats, and the fruits and vegetables, which is going to fall in the real food category.
Right. Nutrition is we're finding with research, is so individual.
Yes, it is.
So that's why we, as health coaches, stick to the basic guidelines in terms of when we're talking to clients, because I mean, you don't want to make recommendations at all because you don't know too. Like we were talking about gallbladders the other day, and like I don't have a gallbladder, so you know.
Right, keto's probably not the best diet for you.
Right, exactly, and so we don't make those types of recommendations.
Yeah.
When we're working with clients.
Yeah, we don't, and it is so individualized, and a big part of, you know, when we're considering that holistic approach, the better we can get at being mindful of how our bodies feel after we eat certain things. You know, I have a lot of discussions with my folks around that of, you know, how did you feel following that meal? Or as we're making some changes, what did you notice? What's different? And that can really help them figure out, okay, maybe this is not working so well for me. Or, yeah, I felt amazing. I never knew that if I integrated this, I could feel so differently. So, you know, a big part of that, again, is kind of just tying back into that mind body of, hey, how is this impacting me? Which is the truth with everything, you know.
Right.
How are you feeling the afternoon after you exercise? You know,
Right.
probably pretty different.
Yeah.
So basically, what does that look like? Again, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, low fat or fat-free milk. Now, again, these are recommendations that are coming from those national agencies, okay? Limited intake of saturated and trans fat, added sugars, sodium, and alcohol. Limited caloric intake to meet the caloric needs. So again, at the end of the day, we all pretty much know, okay, again, there's It's all in what book you want to read, right? Does a calorie matter? Does a calorie not matter? What does this look like? Yet we know that if, to some degree, we all can't walk around eating 10,000 calories a day. So just that general, okay, what is a healthy intake for me? How well do I tolerate fats? Am I, again, there's
dairy.
Right.
I don't tolerate dairy
Right.
at all.
Right. And so everyone's going to kind of come from their own camp. And this is where, if as a coach, you predominantly eat vegetarian or vegan and you've got this paleo person in front of you, it's not our lens.
No.
And so we want to be supportive of their needs and what they are discovering. And so diet can be such a hot topic, and we all have our thoughts and opinions, yet a big part of those thoughts and opinions are because of the way it affects our bodies. And it is so individualized that, we can't really step in and, tell this person.
I think part of the problem in this area has come from, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna, but having things like My Plate, and that is one of the recommended resources for the National Board. But it kind of makes us think, well, there's this one way to eat for all humans.
Yeah.
And all humans should follow this one guideline and way of consuming. And we really, as health coaches, want to encourage our clients to pay attention to our own bodies, how we feel, what our sleep is like, what our energy is like, all of these things. As we are, if your client's working on nutrition, really encourage them to listen to themselves. And just because their coworker had a lot of success with keto, if it's making them feel sick, okay.
Right.
What do you want to do with that information that it's making you feel sick?
Exactly.
Exactly. So I do think the nutrition research has been in the past not so individualized, and now the research is showing, we can take twins, feed them the same foods, and one of them's blood sugar spikes like crazy with oatmeal, and the other one is steady, and they're identical twins.
Yeah.
There's something else going on here with individuals and nutrition. So I think I want to coach in a way that allows each client to be individual with their nutrition.
Right.
Yeah. But also there are basic, like you said earlier, like highly processed foods. We know generally those are not good for us.
Those are not good.
They're not good for any of us.
Everyone in the world can let go of that.
Right. So
no one needs that.
Right. There are some basics that do fit us all, but
exactly.
We want to be careful not to put everybody in the same box.
Right. If we just stick to real food, we're going to win. Right. And, you kind of think that 80-20, when you have your keto or your paleo or your vegan, 80% of what people are eating is about the same. It's the real food. That's what's making it work. And if you do really well on more protein then that's amazing. If you ethically want to be a vegan, phenomenal. That's great. It's there's so many facets that come into play. And again, if we're just eating real food, then we know we are pointing ourselves in the right direction of where we need to go. And, just to kind of speak on, what's your energy level? What's your sleep? To take it a step further, they're having that blood work, hopefully once a year. Okay, what are your inside numbers? Your body can talk to you through those numbers. What are those numbers? I've had people who have jumped on keto and have come back and their cholesterol was off the charts. Just, whoosh, went straight up. And coming back off that keto, things start to settle down. So clearly they were someone who just couldn't handle that much fat. It was just too much. It was too, and a lot of keto tends to go to the bacon and a lot of those processed meats. And we know that that's probably not the best way to do keto either. So, our numbers can be really helpful in figuring out some of this stuff.
Right. What works for us and what doesn't.
Right. Yeah. So what does a healthy diet do? We probably know all of this, so I'm not even going to go through this slide. It basically, if I saw somewhere, and I don't know the actual research paper that shows this, but basically, when we can keep our diet to real food, it almost eliminates every disease. Is what this this article was saying. Again, I didn't check their references or where they all the data, but it makes sense, guys. It makes sense. If we're eating things that are made for our body, then we're probably going to be okay. What those things are is where we get to have fun and have the variety. There's the saying, if it has a label, we probably just don't need to be eating it.
Right.
Although I've noticed like oranges come with labels now sometimes.
They're starting to put labels on.
They are. They're catching on to some of our tips. There's a really good book. I don't know if you guys have read Food Rules. Have you read that book, Michael Pollan? It's cute. It's just like an easy read. There's a food rule on every page. And so like one of them is if it's a plant, eat it. If it's made in a plant, don't.
Yes.
So it's just like all these little rules. It's a great read. And it'll take you 2 seconds to read it.
Yeah,
it's a very
short
easy
read.
Yeah. He actually wrote In Defense of Food, which is another really, really good book if you want to start getting into the science of real food.
I really liked What the Heck Should We Eat?
Oh, that's a good one too. Mark Hyman?
Yes.
Yeah.
I liked that one.
That's a good one. There's a lot of good food books out there. Fat Chance is a good book too from the endocrinologist. I'll think of his name in a minute because I have all his books.
Yeah, I have it too. I read it a few years ago.
I literally just watched. I'll think of it, guys. Seriously, it's the middle-aged brain. It'll come back. I promise. Okay, healthy weight. When we are at a healthier weight, then generally you can see trends that it does reduce our risk of chronic disease, high blood pressure, high lipids, type 2 diabetes, complications with pregnancy, a lot of these things. Now, that is not to say that just because we are not overweight that our numbers are always beautiful either. So again, we're all different. We don't always show it on the outside as far as what is going on the inside, which is where it can be really critical to get to the doctor and have those tests done on a regular basis so we understand kind of how our body, what do we look like metabolically inside? Because that gives us a lot of information about, okay, well, how can we tweak our lifestyle if we're seeing some numbers that are like, this metabolic health is not exactly where we need to be. Okay, we maybe need to do something here. So social factors that can influence diet. These are big, right? Like how many people come to you and it's just so hard because of maybe it's even, just a cultural thing or
it's how their family shows love.
Yeah.
They go to work and somebody's always bringing donuts every morning.
Right.
Whatever.
Or my client whose husband brings her the soda every day and she didn't want to hurt his feelings, yet she had just found out her A1C was in the pre-diabetic range. And so that was what we were working on. It was this whole, I can't remember if it was this class or the other class that we got into.
It was the other class.
It was the other class.
I think so, yeah.
So it was, this huge barrier of, I don't want to hurt his feelings, yet this is not best for me. And, so there's so much that ties into the social influences that come in. Just our basic knowledge. We talked about this earlier. A lot of times we just don't know. And so we don't know what we don't know. We have certain attitudes around food. And, just like Ray and her mayonnaise. She didn't think she liked mayonnaise. She had a really negative attitude about mayonnaise.
That's right. All because I asked for mustard when I was 5 on a sandwich. My family thought I hated mayonnaise, and I never got mayonnaise, even on banana sandwiches. I didn't get mayonnaise.
Well, you were probably better off.
I was better off for it, but I was better off. Yes.
I hate mayonnaise, so I'm never going to be team mayonnaise.
I love it. I just didn't discover I loved it until my 20s.
Maybe my mom grew up to me. Pretty sure I tasted it and hated it, but
you should try it again.
Oh, I don't think
I'm kidding. We're probably all better off without mayonnaise, but it is tasty.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It makes me think of my client who was quitting sugar, who had a Pepsi was bragging about no added sugar for the week, but brought a Pepsi to the session. And I was like, oh, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, we just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, who knew? And it's, because we're embedded in it, right? Like we're touching it and feeling it and seeing it every day. And there's, when you talk to people about, oh, well, I've switched to Special K strawberry cereal, and oh, this is great because the girl on the commercial is like, doing all the yoga and diving in the pool, and it has the same amount of sugar as Fruit Loops.
Right.
And so it really can be helpful as our job to, well, what do you know about that cereal? And just really, there's a lot of nutrition label talk that ends up in my office for sure, particularly like your yogurts and your granolas. Yogurt always seems to be that first place people change. And then it's like, they're eating the tiniest little tub of yogurt and has 23 grams of sugar. So,
which is like 6 teaspoons roughly.
Oh, yeah.
In this
crazy.
tiny little thing.
It's crazy. So, so knowledge is huge. And this is where we can be helpful with resources to provide that. Certain skills, if someone's not comfortable in the kitchen, then they're probably not going to find themselves wanting to cook. And we know that something made in our kitchen, we know what's in it. So we know what is going into our bodies, and we just don't know what is. You've ever watched someone cook like a meal in a restaurant, and it's like, if you've ever watched diners, drive-ins, and dives, and to watch what they put in those, it looks like a simple sandwich, and there's like half a stick of butter in there, and there's, well, I put a little flour in here to do this, and it's like, I would have never known that was in there. So we don't know a lot about the food when we eat out. Not that they're doing it, viciously. And you think, well, no wonder that tasted.
Right. They wanted to taste it.
Well, it never tastes that good in my kitchen. Yeah. But, oh, there's not a stick of butter in there. That explains it.
Left the butter out of my burger.
I know, exactly. Exactly. So, our skills matter in what we eat. Our social support, we already squirreled on that one. What are our societal norms? Cultural norms are huge. Even down to some of the food and agricultural policies.
Girl, don't get me started.
I know, right? Woo! We could do a 4-hour show on that one.
I still feel mad about the corn subsidies. I mean, I think our farmers needed it at one point. Now we're in a vicious cycle. So now we're producing high fructose corn syrup and trying to stuff it in everything.
Everything.
To get rid of corn that is just subsidized and overgrown.
Yeah, it's crazy. The Katie Couric special on Netflix. Did you see, what's the name of that one? It's really good, guys. It kind of digs into a lot of the policies that were developed, but they were talking about same thing with the corn, that the reason why, like, you saw your cheese stuffed crust pizzas develop, like your DiGiorno's and the the Pizza Huts and all of that. Well, when we hit that low fat craze in the 90s, well, that's all they do is skim all that off the top, which is basically cheese. And so they have all this cheese that they couldn't figure out what to do with. And so they just started coming up
putting it into places
with all of these other places that they could put cheese to reintroduce the fat in our world.
Right.
But it's, all these little things go on that it's like, oh, look at those sneaky little guys.
Trying to get rid of food that you don't want to just throw out.
Yeah.
And so they're shoving it in things that there's no point in it being in there.
Exactly.
Same thing with animal feed or our pet food. They're putting it in it to get rid of it. I know. Anyway, all right.
And it fattens them up.
I can get off.
So then it tastes, that's what we prefer. It's a fattier meat. I know, right. Exactly. Back to the slides. Okay. So there's a lot of factors that influence our diet. We're going to go ahead and get off this slide so we can move on to productive things.
My plate.
My plate. Okay. Know this, guys. Know this diagram. Know the parts and pieces. And basically what it's saying is that half your plate needs to be dedicated to fruits and vegetables. And then a quarter of your plate grains, a quarter of your plate protein, and then just a little bit of dairy intermingled. And there will be a couple of questions about this. So just know that half the plate is fruits and vegetables, and that they do integrate a little bit of dairy in their recommendation. There is also the Harvard. They have come up with a plate as well. And this is one that you want to know too. Okay?
Know
so
them
just
apart.
kind of know the differences. Exactly. And so they look very similar in what they're recommending, but as you can see, the Harvard plate gets into a little bit more detail about what they are recommending. And so just read through this slide, be familiar with it.
Notice that dairy is missing from the Harvard one.
Yes, yes. And that they actually emphasize hydration. You know, they have a little bit of that. So it just gets a little more specific, and there's just some slight variations between the two. Okay, so nutritional guidelines. Again, my plate and CDC, which is kind of the same, my plate, differs from Harvard. So know that, have an understanding of both. And really, basically, what we've been talking about from the time we hit play over here, there is no one size fits all, which is why, again, it needs to be client led. So we can be there for resources and a little bit of guidance, yet we do want to have an understanding that they ultimately are going to know what's best for them. And dietary needs are going to change. They're going to be different based on where we are in our life, you know. What is it that we do? How much do we exercise? You know, a triathlete is going to eat very differently than an office worker from 9 to 5 that, you know, really doesn't have the opportunity to move around throughout the workday. So we want to take all that into consideration.
I mean, even our absorption of nutrients changes as we age.
Yes.
So it's very different depending on you. It's very individual.
Fascinating. I know. And I mean, gosh, don't even get us started on the microbiome. When we were talking about the twins.
Yes.
And the microbiome studies on those twins of why it's so different. It is super interesting. So those little guys do a lot.
We need to have some Beth and Ray shows where we just talk about all this stuff.
Oh, I know.
Even if it's not national board required.
Yes, exactly. We do. The fun part of it is half of it just made up Beth and Ray stuff.
No.
All the things
we at
we've
least read it
learned.
somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. It wasn't on TikTok, I promise you
No,
that.
it was not. It was not. Yes. Okay, so these are just some common diets you may come across. You know, low carb, low fat, vegetarian, low glycemic, Mediterranean, paleo, vegan, the DASH diet, an anti-inflammatory diet. A lot of times that falls under the Mediterranean diet. And again, it's not really our job to recommend one of these over another. I do feel like there have been a few agencies that have stepped up and said, hey, if you had to pick one, the DASH and Mediterranean
those are the top
tend to be the ones that if you had to lay a blanket out there for everyone, if everyone were to follow those, they would have the least amount of consequences in our differences, we could say. So, okay, so let's dig into hydration. A lot of times we meet our hydration needs really through a lot of what we eat and then are drinking throughout the day. So it doesn't have to be this all-consuming thing of keeping up with our hydration. However, hydration is important. So, you know, if we're eating soups or celery, tomatoes, cucumbers, all of that, that water counts. I mean, that is water entering our body. So we do get hydration in many forms.
Plus, if you're getting hydration, when you're getting hydration through vegetables and fruits, you are also getting electrolytes and the other good minerals that come with it versus city water that's been stripped of those things. Yeah.
Yes. And so again, another little recommendation. I don't know if any of you guys follow Stacy Sims, but she is a PhD. I think she was out of Stanford. Is she still at Stanford?
I don't know.
She studies women only. So her whole tagline is women are not small men, yet her PhD was based on hydration. So she has some really cool stuff out there on hydration. And that was what she's saying. In order for us to absorb water, we have to have a little bit of sodium and a little bit of fructose in order for our cells to be able to uptake that. So when we are getting it through watermelon, we have the perfect, nature's pretty smart, that we've got this perfect combination of everything that we need to adequately absorb that water. So if we're just walking around with our giant jugs of water all day long, if we don't have the appropriate amount of sodium and glucose with it, then we end up ultimately just kind of peeing it out. Because we don't have the means to absorb it. So anyway, she's done some really cool stuff with hydration. It's interesting. Okay, so hydration, what does it do? Well, it regulates our temperature, it lubricates our joints, it protects our organs, and then obviously we excrete the waste through sweating, urination, and going to the bathroom. And we need water for all that.
You can say bowel movements on here.
We can. Now that's going to be a fun Beth and Ray show.
We should just have a whole show on bowel movements.
Yes. Listen, I have learned some stuff in the world of gastro health. We can do it. Okay. Increased hydration. When is this necessary? If you are moving around a lot, if we've just run a marathon, we're probably going to need to up our hydration. If we live in hotter climates, or even if we're visiting hotter climates, then, we may want to up it. If we're running a fever, or if we have diarrhea or throwing up, we absolutely want to replace some of those, that water that we're losing just through that. So those are just some times when we may want to up it a little bit. Okay, anything else on hydration? I'm trying to think of some of the hydration questions. I think it's just really basic stuff on hydration. Okay, so we'll move on. Physical activity. We all know this. It is critically important. Our bodies were designed to move. As humans, we know that. We feel better when we move better when we move. It's just, physical activity is just so great for us. It does reduce chronic disease. It's going to impact heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer, depression, diabetes, all of them. And pretty quickly, it's pretty amazing when someone who, if we're working on physical activity and then we have their numbers rechecked, how quickly an A1C will move. Just by adding movement. It's pretty impressive, actually. And so we did have the book Spark. If you guys have read Spark or have not read Spark, it is a great book. Really good book. And it just goes through basically all of the things that exercise does, which it almost touches literally everything. I mean, there's data in there that talks about how exercise is equivalent to SSRIs in some studies that they have seen.
When we exercise, our body produces nitric oxide, or NO, as they call it in the health medical field. And that helps dilate our arteries. And so our blood flow is even better. It's even... some like to refer to it as our internal pharmacy when we move.
Oh, I love that.
We have an internal pharmacy that is as good as some of these other medications when we move to just release all the things that we can take in a pill form, but our body also
can do it
and create it for us, but it requires movement.
And who doesn't feel better after getting up and walking around, right? Like, I mean, kind of deep down innately, we know that when we move, we feel better, and it can make a big difference.
And when we're saying physical activity, you don't have to bust a move. We're not talking about, I know sometimes people hear exercise and they hate that word, and they remember being whistles from high school and middle school blowing in the gym. We're not talking about that. We're not. You don't have to nearly kill yourself to get the benefits of physical activity.
Right. Just moving your body
and
makes a difference.
Formulas out there now for like your age and
your zones.
Yes.
my sister, we just had a long talk about zone 2 cardio and
Yeah.
women, and ask Stacy Sims. She says women don't need zone 2 cardio because we're already metabolically different from men. Sad note. Y'all can do some research on that. Get back to us on where we stand with zone 2.
Yes. Right. I love that her research is on women, and particularly older.
Yes,
women.
I know. Exactly. Exactly. Those whose brains have stopped working. It's wonderful.
Just temporarily.
Just thank God.
Just hold on. It's going to come back. It'll
Yes.
come back.
Oh, so anyway, there's that.
And here are the physical
I don't
activity
even know what we were
guidelines.
exactly. Oh, movement is movement. Yes, yes. And that there are different zones. And honestly, I mean, when you're working with someone who has never done anything, a walk down the driveway is going to serve them positively.
Yes.
You know, and it doesn't have to look like what we think it looks like, this hour-long session. You know, there is data out there that says, hey, if you're working out in segments throughout the day, it all adds up. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this set thing to see benefits. So sometimes just having a discussion around, what if we change the definition of exercise? I end up having that discussion a lot because, again, so often it's like, oh my God, well, I'm going to have to be at the gym, or I'm going to have to be on this, and I'm going to have to do this and this. And, you know, if we can just begin to add some movement in, it goes a long way.
Yep.
Okay. These are the current physical activity guidelines, and this will be 100% on your exam. So know these. And I had several questions of this. So adults, it's going to be 150 minutes of moderate activity or 75 minutes of vigorous activity with 2 days of strength training
Per week.
per week. Okay. Older adults is basically going to be the same, with the addition of adding in some balance and strength training as well. So they may need to be working a little bit on that balance component. But ideally, if you can get that 150, it's still the recommendation. And then it's just, if they need to modify based on their abilities, then that's an option too. Pregnant women, again, you know, they have left out the strength training component of this, which is interesting. Because there's probably some data on that. But we will stick to the current physical activity guidelines of 150 minutes of moderate activity under the care of their physician. So if they are accustomed, you know, if you've got a triathlete out there, gosh, you've seen women run marathons. Again, I think there's probably a lot of missing data in this department because people are probably, you know, we don't want to harm a pregnant woman, so it's probably hard data to gather, you know, in a formal study.
Sure,
There's probably a lot of retroactive data
There
out
has
there.
been a movement from when women become pregnant, you need to rest, you need to be still, you need to, no, keep moving the way you move.
Do your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, do your thing. And then adults with chronic health conditions, it's basically the same as an adult, with just an understanding of if we need to modify, then we need to modify. So they're all really kind of fall right in there together. However, they will separate it out and say a pregnant woman, you know, again, it'll be a scenario the way they ask it. So just know that there are some very minute differences that fall within some of those. This is the reference to the website, and then we've just got a little picture here that breaks it down. So basically just 150 minutes a week, or that 75 of intense activities is what we're shooting for. And I think I read somewhere like 5% of the population meets that, something crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know the actual number. Don't quote me on that, but
It was low.
Most of us are not getting what we need. Okay, just a quick slide on wearables, just that we know that they're out there. And I think we even talked a little bit about this in one of our other Beth and Ray shows. Just that we know that they're out there. Just kind of be aware of the trendy ones and what they do and how they're using it. And just to understand that sometimes they want us to just buy their device and we don't necessarily always have research behind it. So just kind of having an understanding of.
I had a question on wearables on my exam.
Yeah, I think I did too.
But it was just in
Just
it was
general.
It was very general.
Very
It wasn't
general.
like, what is a Fitbit and what does
Right.
it do? So it wasn't knowing specific ones, but it was, I can't remember now, but I remember a question
Yeah.
about wearables because it surprised me.
I know.
Which is probably why we have a slide on it.
It is. Why we have a slide on
Everything
it.
is so intentional with us.
Okay, let's talk about sleep.
Sleep, baby.
Yes, this is Ray's baby.
It's my favorite thing.
Yes, yes. Okay, so according to the CDC, insufficient sleep really is a public health epidemic, and it really is the foundation. I mean, it's critical to our well-being. If we are not sleeping, nothing else can really happen the way that it's supposed to. So for every hour you're awake, it takes half an hour of sleep to process, memorize, and integrate that information, which is pretty remarkable.
We spend a lot of time sleeping. We should spend a lot of time sleeping.
Exactly.
We don't
exactly.
always.
And so it really is necessary for everything. I mean, metabolically, our body just needs that rest so that it can get in and clean up and do the things that it needs to do. And that way we can function the way we need to. And when we have that lack of sleep, we see that it is linked to traffic accidents, work errors, decreased productivity, the whole thing. And so this was an interesting study that I came across, and I think that this, they were doing this study on like pharmacy students, I think, or pre-med.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was
Because they have to stay awake
Yes.
for so long.
Yes, it was done on students staying up late studying. And what they found is that if you have been up for a consecutive 17 to 19 hours, it was similar to a blood alcohol level of
Drinking and driving.
legal. Yeah.
Your impaired
Yeah.
function.
And I mean, think how many times we've gotten like 2 hours of sleep,
Right.
3 hours of sleep.
So weird because I did that in
And-
college all the time to study.
Yes,
I was
exactly.
doing myself a disservice
Yes.
and didn't know it.
Yes. And so it matters. It really does. And we think that we're, oh no, I can handle it. I'm on point. Yet, I mean, this was clearly the cognitive testing that they did showed that no, we can't.
Right.
We can't. We really need to give ourselves a
I think they've even,
break.
because of some of the research, they've changed the requirements for pilots. I think I read that in something.
Oh, really?
They used
Which
to
makes
force them to stay awake longer, and now they're forcing them to have some napping
yeah.
and sleep in between before they can go. I think some of the flights are even delayed now because pilots are required to lay down and rest before they can go again. I don't know. I read that.
Which I'm all in favor.
Yeah, me too.
Sleep, pilot, sleep.
I want my pilot to be well rested.
I don't need him drinking and driving.
No,
That's for sure.
exactly. Oh, I added this.
Okay, I'm gonna let Ray do this slide.
Okay,
Shoot through this one.
Yeah, what makes us sleep? Well, there's two things. We generally think of one, the circadian rhythm, and most of us know about that, the 24-hour clock, and the guys who went into a cave and tested to see if this was legit, if it really had something to do with the sun, and found out, sure enough, we really have some innate thing in us, even when there's no light, that is not exactly 24 hours, but pretty close to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't it come closer to 25 hours?
It was a
from
little
what
bit
I was
more.
reading? Yeah.
It was a little bit more. And I think, though, the sun helps us reset it back to 24 hours. So anyway, so the circadian rhythm is like a real thing. And it's not just theory, but we really, really do sleep. And one of the reasons why we sleep is this thing. We have this pineal gland that's in the middle of our brain, and it produces a hormone called melatonin, which you've probably heard of, and some of you may take some of it at night when you're struggling to sleep. But the pineal gland begins to produce melatonin about dusk for most people. This also, the SN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, also causes our body temperature to drop. And that also helps us to sleep better as well. So we've got this thing going on. And we think that everybody should be sleeping at the same time, but some studies show, and I'm getting all of this from the Why We Sleep book, which I put on a slide somewhere later, by Matthew Walker, I think his name was. We have people who are early birds and we have night owls, and we've kind of forced everybody into the early bird category with first shift employment. But not everybody is really wired that way naturally. And he breaks it out in his book as 40% of us are early birds, 30% are night owls, and 30% of us are in between. And he likens this to a survival for the species tactic, so that we had people who could be on watch. So unfortunately, for those of you who are naturally night owls, don't beat yourself up. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
That's probably just your natural routine. And when your melatonin comes in, and your line of people were the people who stayed up late to keep us safe. And the early birds were the people who got up early to keep us safe from the lions and the tigers and all of that. So we do have that, the circadian rhythm. The second reason, though, that we sleep, and this was a surprise to me when I read this book, was what's called sleep pressure. It's actually adenosine, which is just a byproduct of cellular metabolism. So we're just producing it all day long, adenosine. It builds up in our brains all day, and it only flushes and resets when we sleep out of our brain. That is the only time. And the more active you are and the higher levels of brain activity and physical activity you have, the higher levels of adenosine you're going to have. So if you're a person who likes to nap, like me, you probably are either more sensitive to adenosine or you are a more active person. And you need to reset. If you've ever felt yourself kind of in a slump after lunch, that's your adenosine buildup that you're feeling. There is one thing that can cause us not to feel our adenosine, our sleep pressure, and that is caffeine. Caffeine fits in the adenosine receptors. Fits right in there. Not only does it block it like somebody's boxing out in basketball, it actually inactivates the receptor. So adenosine itself can't get in. And so what's going on inside of us then is our body will produce more, because it's like, wait, the adenosine's not getting into the receptor. Let me produce some more adenosine. And so you'll have more sleep pressure. But if you have caffeine on board, you don't feel it. It's still there. It's still growing. The other thing that also increases arbitrarily our sleep pressure, our adenosine, is alcohol. And so alcohol doesn't block the receptors. It just makes you produce more. And so some of you will have some alcohol and you feel sleepy. Yeah, it's producing more adenosine. So it makes sense why you feel a little sleepier after you've had some alcohol. Anyway, if you don't have any caffeine and no alcohol in your system, it basically takes roughly 8 hours to fully flush your adenosine.
Oh, gosh.
Which I think is part of the reason why we really kind of need to sleep about 8 hours.
Yeah.
And some of us, like I said, are more sensitive than others to adenosine. And so some of us can flush it in 7. Some of us, it takes more like 9. It's very individual. But these are the 2 reasons why we sleep. And these 2 things, it's interesting to note, they don't follow the same pattern. As you know, circadian rhythm is 24 hours, roughly speaking. But adenosine, I think, maybe even got its name. It follows more of a sine wave throughout the day.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so they don't run together. So that's why we can feel sleepy during the day versus at night. We feel sleepy at different points in the day and night for different reasons.
Yeah. I think one of the things that stood out with me in that book is, you know, when he's talking about sleep habits, and he's talking about how it's not the best idea to let yourself fall asleep on the couch before you get up and go to bed, because what happens is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a good part of your adenosine gets wiped out in those first few hours that you're asleep.
Yes.
And so what happens is, when you wake up, you have a harder time falling back asleep, because you no longer have this adenosine in place
You don't have the buildup
to help you fall back asleep. And so when we're talking about sleep habits with clients, that may be something that is like, well, I fall asleep on the couch every night and then I get in my room and I just can't go to sleep. It's like, oh.
Yeah. One of the things they recommend for older adults, because as we age, our sleep patterns change a little bit. Our melatonin starts coming in a little earlier than it did. We're more sensitive to caffeine than we used to be. But one of the things the book recommends in that case is getting out in the sun in the afternoon to kind of help let one part of the reason why you sleep help another part of the reason why you sleep. So instead of older adults getting out in the sun first thing in the morning, the way young people would benefit is wait till maybe noon and get out there. and let it help reset. So, yeah, it's interesting.
It's fascinating.
Oh my word, it's so fascinating. I was fascinated I didn't know that the brain actually shrinks to 60% of its normal size while you sleep to help with this flushing.
Crazy.
Yes, so these fluids and all can travel through your brain and reset this adenosine for your next day. And for those of you who nap, you do get a small adenosine flush and reset during the napping.
Right.
So it helps you wake up, feel more refreshed for some.
For some, yeah.
For some. It does. It does.
Some of us are not nappers.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah. Yes. It doesn't have the same effect on everybody. It's individual.
Yeah. Okay. So these are just current sleep recommendations. I don't think they get super specific in knowing, like, certainly not like a school age versus an adult, but just an understanding of 7 or more hours per night is really what's recommended as far as what most people are going to sleep. You do have some of your short sleepers, which don't necessarily, they're kind of this outlier. They don't necessarily need that 7 or more hours.
But isn't that like 5 to 10% of the population?
I think it's,
very
really
low.
tiny.
Like 5% of the
Really
population
tiny.
are genuinely genetically wired to be short sleepers.
I think about 50% of the population think they are short
Right.
sleepers. If we're not.
But when it was measured in a study, it's not that.
It's not. We actually need this sleep. Yes. So these are some common sleep disorders: insomnia, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome, and sleep apnea. These are probably going to come up on your exam. And these are the only ones that crop up. These are just kind of the most common things that you can see that interfere with sleep.
Yeah, and you don't need to know all the details about all of those.
No,
It's
just
more,
that they exist and that they're common.
Yeah.
That's what you need to know.
Right.
And basically, inadequate sleep is, we could just change the slide to everything.
Right.
It's linked to everything. Predominantly heart disease,
all
diabetes,
things bad.
all things we don't want.
Right.
Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about sleep hygiene. Did I put this one in?
You did.
I did.
You did, but that's okay. I can talk
Oh,
about it.
no. I just forgot that I had done this because, again, I went back and redid these slides after I read that book, too. Okay. Be consistent. Go to bed at the same time. Get up at the same time. I mean, we are all kind of familiar with these. Make sure your bedroom's quiet, dark, a comfortable temperature. Temperature makes a big difference in how we sleep.
Yeah, kind of interject.
Yeah. You just do this slide. You can take over.
Oh no, you're doing great. I just wanted to say, like, this is nerdy, I know, but the pineal gland that's in there, that produces the melatonin, it quits producing it. Like, it drops way off as soon as we start falling asleep, and it still takes a while to course through our blood while we're sleeping. It peaks in our blood about 4 a.m. roughly for normal sleepers. I'm not talking about third shift people, but. Anyway, the pineal gland, as soon as it detects light, it quits producing melatonin. So if you have too much light in your bedroom, it'll quit producing. And it shouldn't yet.
Right.
And it can be from a street light. It can be from a light on your clock, or your TV has a little light on it if you've got a TV in there. And different people are sensitive at different levels. However, tests have been run where they've put people with a eye mask or whatever, and your pineal gland still stops. It detects light through your eyelids, through eye masks, I mean, they help, of course.
Right.
But it's somehow...
It's that sensitive.
It knows.
Yeah.
There's this thing inside, I'm amazed, there's this thing inside of us that knows. So it's why light and people move into urban areas when we really were wired as humans to be sleeping out in the stars, as our light. So it knows, and even today. So it's very important in your sleep hygiene that your room is quiet. We could talk more about that maybe in a future episode of how we hear, and our brain is wired to shut off sound at night during periods, and it's dark, in our room and stay dark in our room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why the phones are not helping our cause.
Especially if they light up when in the night while
Yeah.
your pineal gland will be like, oh,
Yeah.
light
Exactly.
just appeared. Let's shut down melatonin.
Yeah. I just got a text from my daughter last week. She just moved an apartment. She's in college. She just moved an apartment, and the street light is they have to keep their windows open because they don't have air conditioning in Boone.
Oh, yeah.
In Boone, North Carolina, it's the mountains. And so she keeps her window open, yet there's this light is right in front of her. And she's like, Mom, I cannot sleep. It's so bright in my room. So she just bought some blackout curtains, and I just got the text, and all it was a picture of her room. Best purchase ever. And it is pitch black in there.
Oh my gosh.
But it does. It makes such a difference.
I live in the city. And so I have in my bedroom literally black plastic, about 7 mil on my windows. I have no lights, even on my TV that has a little light. And I do have a TV in my room, which is bad, but I can't help it. I have to watch football, you know. I've even got I bought a stuffed animal that I can place right in front of it that blocks out my little, like I've got zero, it's a cave.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. So you wake up and you're like, oh my God, you know, you sleep in the hotel and you're like, what is happening right now?
Right.
How did I sleep till 8 a.m.?
Right.
This is
It's all
crazy.
blacked out.
I know. It's amazing.
Okay, so I squirreled on the making sure your bedroom is dark.
It's dark. There we go.
Yes.
Okay, meals, caffeine, alcohol can have a huge impact on our sleep. Exercise can be super helpful, because again, when we're expending that energy, then we are going to be sleeping better because then we're getting all our chemicals in check to set us up for the perfect night's sleep.
Yep. It helps us our hormones move around our body and get rid of melatonin in the mornings, and so it can reset. Yeah, there's so many reasons why exercise helps with sleep.
And it's a big stress reducer, so we're not this when we go to sleep.
Right, that's right.
We feel good.
And another note about caffeine. Can you tell I'm a caffeine-free person?
Yeah, me too.
We're personally.
We're those weirdos. We didn't get the enzyme.
We're the weirdos.
We can't have it.
Yes, my liver
No.
My liver enzyme for dealing with caffeine is just non-existent.
Non-existent. Me either.
Yeah, it took me a lot of years to figure that out. But the caffeine in terms of half-life, it stays in your system anywhere from 5 to 7 hours is its half-life, which means after 5 to 7 hours, the caffeine is cut in half. And after another 5 to 7 hours, it's cut in half again.
Yeah.
And you do the math on those hours, and you can see even caffeine in the morning, you're still going to be having some of that potentially in your system, especially if you're drinking it in the afternoon and for supper. And for those of us who struggle to get rid of caffeine, it really can.
It's a disaster.
Yeah, it really can affect your sleep in a negative way.
Yeah, for sure. And probably more so than you realize for those who can handle the caffeine.
Yeah, it's still doing its thing.
It's always easy for us because it's a no-brainer. No, I can't have it.
Yeah, and I mean your body does adjust. So like if I went back to drinking caffeine, it would adjust. It would be like, okay, she's giving me caffeine. I got to readjust. So I think I would get more and more able to fall asleep. But again, it's in there while I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keeping me from deep sleep. It's keeping me from that deep sleep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And alcohol too. You know, it affects your REM sleep. So we feel like it makes us sleep a little better, fall asleep, yet we're not falling through all those sleep cycles because it inhibits us from falling in those sleep cycles.
Yes, and if you're interested in more information on sleep, there is the book, Why We Sleep.
Yes, it's a great book.
It's a great book.
And then the last one is just exposing our eyes to light first thing in the morning really helps reset that circadian rhythm. So Andrew Huberman has he's a neurological ophthalmologist. He has a ton of stuff on circadian rhythms and vision.
I didn't realize he was an ophthalmologist. Okay.
And so he has some really awesome stuff out there too in his podcast. I mean, you got to have pen and paper when you listen to it.
Yeah, they're intense.
They're intense, but it's some really, really cool stuff. And so a lot of his podcasts are devoted to vision type things, but he's a neurologist, so it's a lot of brain health stuff too. But interesting. Okay, on to stress, emotional wellness. This really is the most common psychosocial risk factor for chronic disease is unmanaged stress, depression, social isolation. This is big. Our stress matters. And the thing with stress is it's never going away, right? Like it becomes, how do we become resilient to our stress? How do we understand how to manage our stress? Not how can we brush it under the carpet? How can we make it go away? We can't really ever reduce our stress. We can only change the way we react to our stress. And that's a big, when we talk to people, they're like, oh, if I could just get rid of all my stress. And it's like, well, the reality is we stress because we care. And we're never going to stop caring. We're always going to want to be a good employee. We're always going to want to take care of our parents. We're always going to want to be a good mother to our kids, father, friend. So we're never going to stop caring. So it becomes, how can I deal with the stress? How can I understand my triggers? And then how can I be better about allowing myself to work through those triggers, work through that stress, as opposed to wanting it to just go away?
I think it creates more stress trying to push it away and get rid of it, ignore it, whatever.
Yes.
It just adds stress on top of stress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So it's really up to us to be able to recognize particularly signs of depression, and make sure we know how to have a referral in place for that, and just being familiar with common stress reduction techniques, what some of those look like, and understand that our emotional wellness goes beyond stress management. Paying attention to our thoughts, paying attention to our feelings, our behaviors, both positive and negative, but really getting in touch with ourselves. What are my triggers? How am I responding to this can be really helpful. And we also want to have an awareness of social determinants of health. This is a big thing, and it has a huge impact on well-being. And so it's something that we definitely want to take into account and understand. So the coach is aware of the role self-awareness plays in our growth and personal maturation.
Yes, it is a weird word, maturation.
I know. Doesn't sound like me to put it on there that way.
Maybe I did. You could just say maturity.
Yeah. Anyway, self-awareness is big. That's what we're going to go with here. And understanding that we have a purpose in life, and appreciating that purpose can really lead to positive outcomes. And so when we think about emotional wellness, we really do want to feel that sense of purpose. And there's a ton of data out there on having a sense of purpose and how that really does feed our soul. It really does help us move in that positive direction. And it's important for us, again, to tie the importance of our health to our vision, our values, that overall purpose of being alive. Because again, that's what's going to really keep us motivated and allow us to feel good about why we're even doing the things to begin with, and why we're here, that there is a greater purpose in us being here.
I think part of coaching is sometimes helping clients to extract what is their purpose.
Yes.
I feel like some come with a bit of a struggle of, why am I here? What is my purpose?
Yeah, what is my why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have one.
Yeah.
Or multiple.
We all do. Yeah.
Multiple ones. Yeah, and I think part of coaching is to evoke that.
Yeah. I call them my wellness whys. Like, we dig into, what are your wellness whys? Then, what is...
I like that, wellness whys.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mental health. What is mental health? basically it's our emotional, psychological, and social well-being, kind of all packaged in there together. As a coach, it's important for us to be aware of some of those warning signs that come into play if we think there may be some mental health issues going on. And so what does that look like? Eating or sleeping a lot. You may notice that they're beginning to pull away. They're low energy, kind of that flat tone that's going on. Maybe they report just feeling numb, that nothing really matters, feeling hopeless. Some of these are pretty common sense when, maybe they're beginning to drink, smoke a little more. Maybe they're beginning to change their eating patterns. You may see like an uptick in some of that stress eating, yelling, fighting with friends and family, mood swings. All of these things can kind of tie in. And again, when you have a rapport with your client, you'll notice if some of these have changed. And sometimes they just tell you that some of this has changed. And again, I haven't had to make a whole lot of mental health referrals. I really haven't.
No, me either.
They have either already been working with a mental health specialist and we're working in conjunction, or it just really hasn't been an issue.
I guess it would depend on what area you're working in, though.
Yes, definitely. Like we have in one of our other classes, one of our students works with VA, particularly PTSD. And so it was interesting to hear what he typically sees, which is really common. That creeps up a lot in actually some of the people that he's working with. So it does depend on the setting that you're in. Okay, depression and anxiety. Depression is basically a feeling of sadness, loss of interest, particularly in activities you once enjoyed. If you've got that guitar player that just really loves it and then all of a sudden it just doesn't have any interest in playing the guitar. It's different from sadness or grief. With sadness and grief, that self-esteem is preserved. Yeah. And that's kind of one of the factors that you can see with depression is, okay, this is a little bit more than just being sad. I'm starting to pick up on some changes in that self-esteem. Maybe this does look like a referral. Versus anxiety, with anxiety, a normal reaction to stress can be very positive. Stress is good. We learn from stress. That's how we grow. Yet anxiety is when it kind of creeps over. It's this excessive fear or
kind of will shut you down in your life in ways, keep you from doing things and going out, like social anxieties or something like that, where I feel like anxiety, when it's a problem, begins to interfere with life, normal life.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then there's social isolation. We know social connections matter and they're big. And so we want to, pay attention to that and make sure that there are, some positive social interactions going on. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the social determinants of health. These are the conditions of the environments where people are born, live, work, learn, play, all the things. And our social determinants really do have a huge impact on our well-being. They determine, how much money we make. What are the educational opportunities that are available? What health care is available? This includes our neighborhood and our built environments around us. Do we have access to parks? Do we have access to grocery stores?
Right. Food insecurity.
Right. Yeah. Are we in a food desert? It's going to be hard to lose the label. If we're in a food desert, it's easy for us to sit here and say, oh, eat real food, eat real food. And when we have someone who the only thing they have access to is a convenience store and a Family Dollar, that discussion is going to look a little different.
About an hour drive.
Right.
More.
So there's a lot that ties into those social determinants, and they really do have a major impact on well-being. Okay. How does stress affect the body? Pretty much everywhere. It touches everything.
Yes.
It really does. So, the better we can manage that stress and become resilient to it and understand it and really appreciate it. We have a whole talk on stress that we may upload as a Beth and Ray show in the near future if we have time. But it's all in how we view it. If we feel like stress is doing nothing but taking us down and it's just killing us and it's terrible, versus shifting our mindset to, what did I learn from this stress? How did this stress make me stronger? How did this stress make me better? What happened on the other side? There are these two mindsets that come into stress. And so the way we view the stress then absolutely can determine how we cope with it.
It makes me think of that student yesterday in class who said she was super stressed out and didn't want to do the first coaching session because she was so stressed and anxious about it. And at the end, she said she felt amazing.
She sure did. She sure did.
Like, without that stress, the level of amazing wouldn't have been as high.
Right, and she would not have been near as prepared.
Right.
And
that's right.
Yes. So it doesn't have to be the killer we think it is. Yeah. It doesn't. So what are some ways that we can help with the way that we deal with stress? All sorts of activities, just taking some deep breaths, meditation. Our diet plays a huge role in our stress levels. Think about those weekends that you've kind of just been out and doing all the things and you're just kind of grouchy that Monday. Like, oh my gosh, I can tell that my diet was not.
My diet was off this weekend.
In check, yes, in check. Yeah. And then our gut biome is angry at us and then it's messing with our serotonin levels because it's not able to do what it needs to do. So nutrition's huge. Exercise, we talked about that. Again, the book Spark goes into all of the ways that exercise can help with stress. Sleep, we want to make sure those sleep habits are in check. We want to take time to unwind and, do things that make us feel good. Work on our connections. Have some fun with family and friends. Take some time to laugh. All of these things can really be helpful. So let's talk a little bit about relaxation techniques. These are basically exercises designed to elicit our relaxation response. And so we do turn into more of that slower breathing, lower heart rate. We're really shifting into that parasympathetic system versus always being in that sympathetic go, go, go system. So these are just some common relaxation techniques. These are ones that are specifically listed on their study guide. So just be familiar with these because you may see these again.
Yeah, I know autogenic training was on my, was a question on my exam.
Yes, it was on mine too. So just know these, and these are the ones that they are in particular recommending. But progressive relaxation, autogenic training, just guided imagery. We've talked a lot about that when getting our vision going, biofeedback, self-hypnosis, and then just various breathing exercises. So again, I won't read through this whole slide, but you guys just kind of familiarize yourself with this. Okay, so let's shift gears into substance abuse. We're almost at the end of this episode, I promise, guys.
It's kind of a long episode.
It is kind of a long episode. I didn't realize it was this long. Okay, substance abuse. Basically, we want to be able to recognize red flags. We want to know how and when to refer. And, self-medication's a thing. I mean, we see this in people, and particularly people who suffer from chronic pain. A lot of times you'll see that they're kind of finding some of these escape methods that, when you start to see some alcohol creep in or other means that may not be serving our health the way that we would like it to. So let's talk a little bit about tobacco. Tobacco really is the largest preventable lifestyle habit associated with death and chronic disease. If there's one habit we could kick, I think every physician would agree, tobacco. Tobacco's the one. It's linked to multiple cancers, heart disease, chronic illness, all the things, diabetes, arthritis. It basically touches every cell in the body. And so we really want to stay on top of, okay, what are the tobacco trends, particularly now with the vapes and the kids that are accessing vapes. And I heard a physician say that, one cartridge of those things could almost be like a carton of cigarettes.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot. I don't know enough about tobacco to really know what I'm talking about. But basically, when you're taking in this little thing, it seems so tiny.
But it is concentrated.
But the amount of nicotine can be really, really high. And our kids are getting their hands on them. And so we just need to stay up to date with and know that it's out there. Okay, alcohol. These, again, are some numbers you want to be familiar with, what they consider binge drinking, moderate drinking, and heavy drinking. So binge drinking is going to be 5 or more drinks in one setting for a male and 4 or more for a female, generally within 2 hours, which I got to say, I was kind of taken back by that. I thought, and when they threw that 2 hours in there, it's like, well, they are getting it done. We're back in college, folks. So, but that is the definition of binge drinking, is that 4 or more within 2 hours. And your moderate drinking is going to be, 2 or less, or 1 or less for a female. So this is kind of when they say, that glass of wine. As a female, you wouldn't really want more than 1 glass a night, or men 2 a night is kind of what's falling in that moderate. And then heavy drinking is 15 drinks or 8 drinks per week for a female. Yeah. 15 for a male. So
and I want to say, if you're a male who's not a big sizable male, I think it also, part of this is about size of human. Yeah. So, because these are like U.S. standards.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So just be familiar with what they consider binge drinking. And I think binge drinking was the question on mine.
Yes, I had one about binge drinking.
Yeah.
Well, it was scenario, like, had all these different biometrics or whatever, and they were saying which one
that was in one.
Which one is the problem? Which one would you be concerned about as a health coach? And it was a woman having 3 glasses of wine at night before she went to bed, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And that is it, guys.
That brings us to the end.
That brings us to the end. We're ending on alcohol. We're ending on a fun note here. We're feeling better about our binge drinking.
Yeah, makes me feel better.
Send that out to a 4-hour dinner. You're totally safe. I'm kidding.
Yes.
Okay. So that is we've completed 2 of the 3, health and wellness. So our next episode will be dedicated to chronic disease. So we'll dive into all of the things, high blood pressure, diabetes, all of that stuff in the next episode.
Yeah. As always, if you have questions,
you know where to find us.
Give us a holler.
Okay. Thanks, guys.